Derek and Richard's telephone. We're getting well, you all right?
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Hope you're all feeling fighting fit this morning. Could you make sure your seatbelts are fastened, please? It's a legal requirement here to wear a seatbelt, so whatever you do, make sure your seatbelts are on. Okay, right, Richard, ready when you are. So, everyone comfortable? Let's go and see a little bit of London this morning. It's a lovely sunny morning and nice and cold and crisp out there, but lovely and bright, so it'll be good for some photographs today. So hope you're going to enjoy your morning with us. We've got a little programme of sightseeing, a panoramic drive around London this morning, and we will be making some stops, of course, for photographs, and we also have a restroom stop at when we get up to St Paul's Cathedral. There's facilities there that you can use. So, and we should be back to the hotel around about between 11:30 and 11:45, that sort of time. So, plenty of time if you're going out to the Tower of London this afternoon, because I think quite a few of you are on the excursion to the Tower of London, the optional excursion this afternoon. So you'll have time to get a bit of lunch before you go out on that. So, as Julianne said, I'm Derek, and I'm a London Blue Badge guide. That's one of the official guides here in the city, and I'm also one of the GLOBUS team of guides. So I'll be looking after you this morning on the morning tour. I think, did we introduce Richard? If we haven't introduced Richard, oh, you did. Well, I think we should all say good morning to Richard, everyone. Morning, Richard.
I won't stand up.
Don't stand up. That's it. You stay where you are in your seat. That'll be fine. And so it's Derek and Richard looking after you this morning. And we do the city tours. That's what we're here to do. So that's what we shall do this morning. Now, the city itself, you're sort of right in the heart of London, really. It's very, very central here, just opposite the Underground station. I don't know if anyone's been travelling on the Tube, but if you look there just ahead of you, you can see with the red glazed tiles around the entrance, that's Lambeth North Underground Station, or Tube Station, and that's where I emerged from just an hour or so ago, as I always travel underground, and it's always the fastest way. But it's nice to go on a bus as well, of course, because you see things. But that's your local tube station, so anyone who's being adventurous and wants to venture out on London's underground or tube system, that's the local station, obviously just across the road. And the line is the Bakerloo line, the brown one, which is a very useful line, actually. It takes you right through the centre of London, and that's where we're heading now, up towards the River Thames. And we're going to go over the Thames onto the other side of the river. London, population-wise, has a population of 8.8 million, so it makes it Western Europe's largest city, 8.8 million people, and we're squeezed into an area of 650 square miles. And if that doesn't mean a lot to you, well, imagine you're at the centre of the city. It's 15 miles in any direction to get to the edge of the city. So London is about 30 miles across, so it's a very big city, a big metropolitan area. And like any big city, we divide it up into administrative units, and these are called the London boroughs. There are 32 London boroughs. This one is Lambeth, and that's where you're staying. So you're in the London borough of Lambeth, that's where your hotel is, and that's directly across the river from another very famous borough, and that's the city of Westminster, and that's where we're heading very shortly. So 32 boroughs in total, including Lambeth, where we are now, and then right in the centre there's a very special place. It's called the City with a capital C, and it's only a square mile. And that was the part of London that the Romans established back 2,000 years ago, when in the 1st century, 43 AD it was, they came, they conquered, and they set up a trading city on the north side of the river. Called it Londinium, and that's how London was born, really. London's story really began with the Romans 2,000 years ago. And that city of London, that square mile that the Romans created, is still with us. The wall's gone, there's a fragment of it here and there, but for the most part the wall has disappeared, but the boundary line on the map is still the same as it was in Roman times. And we'll be visiting that square mile on our panoramic tour this morning, because St Paul's Cathedral is on the hill right in the middle of that square mile. So we'll be in Westminster, and we'll also be in the City of London. So London's a bit strange, actually. It's got two city boroughs, the City and Westminster side by side on the other side of the river, and they developed separately. The City of London developed for the merchants, for the trade, and the City of Westminster developed for the King and Parliament. So we have government in one and trade in the other, and that's the way it is right to this present day. Now, here on our right, St Thomas's Hospital, they've got a little museum inside this hospital over there to Florence Nightingale, the Lady of the Lamp. So if you've heard of Florence Nightingale, who came back to London from the Crimean War in 1851, appalled at the the lack of nursing care, and set up a nursing school here on the right-hand side in St Thomas's Hospital, which she originally helped to design. Not those buildings, they're modern buildings, but the original St Thomas's buildings. Florence Nightingale helped to design them and set up a nursing school there in the 1860s. The Nightingale nurses are still graduate from the nursing school to this very day inside there. And there's a little museum to Florence Nightingale. The first rule in Florence Nightingale's Book of Modern Nursing, by the way, was that all nurses should attend their patients sober. Yeah, that's right. Because in the old days, you see, they weren't so respectable as Florence Nightingale wanted them to be. So she knocked them into shape. This garden on the left-hand side is the Archbishop of Canterbury's back garden. It's almost backing onto your hotel, actually, because the Archbishop of Canterbury, and his name at the current Archbishop is Justin Welby, the very Reverend Justin Welby. He lives in Lambeth Palace. This is his London home, and over the wall here on the left you'll see a collection of ancient buildings, and some of them dating way, way back to the 14th century. You can see some of them there now on the left. That's all part of Lambeth Palace, the official residence of the Archbishop of Canterbury, and the main entrance into Lambeth Palace, just here on our left, this red brick gatehouse, which is just over our left shoulder. Now let's have a look at the River Thames, and the River Thames, is it looking low? Is it looking high? Oh, it's about somewhere in the middle, I think, this morning. So it's not high tide, it's not low tide, it's somewhere between. And we're going to cross the bridge on the right, which is Lambeth Bridge, and that will take us over to Westminster on the other side, Lambeth Bridge. And you get a nice view as we cross Lambeth Bridge. As Richard takes us round onto the bridge, you'll have a view left upstream towards all the new apartments that are being built along the riverside, and look to the right and you can see all the way down to Parliament and the London Eye, which we'll be a bit closer to a little later. So let's come onto the bridge and have a look at the view. Parliament looks lovely in the sunshine, doesn't it? All that golden stone, that Yorkshire stone from the north of England. There it is over to your right. So that's a nice view, isn't it? You can look down to your right, and there is Westminster Bridge, which is the green painted bridge next downstream, and there's a nice side-on view of the London Eye. You can see it actually is straight, but I'm pleased to say. So let's go over the Thames, the River Thames, London's river, and into Westminster on the other side. If you're looking to the left, you can see all the tall apartments down there. A lot of them are residential. That tall cylindrical tower in the distance to the left, the tallest residential tower in Europe, so they tell me, and it's called the Tower. That's very imaginative, isn't it? I think they could have thought of something a bit better than that, but it's called the Tower at St George's Wharf. Anyway, there you go. So this is Horse Ferry Road as we come into Westminster. Horse Ferry Road. No horse ferry anymore, thankfully, but we'll head all the way down towards Victoria. So we're going to take you out west a little bit first, and then we're going to come back in again, and we'll be making some stops for some photographs as well along the way. Nice on a Sunday morning, isn't it? So it's so quiet. The roads tend to be quiet. Things open on Sunday in London at usually around about 11 o'clock. That's when things start to get going. A lot of the stores open 11:30, that sort of time, and they open until 6 usually, and that's the usual time for the bigger stores here in London. About 11 o'clock until 6 o'clock, because they're restricted on a Sunday as to how many trading hours they can open for, and that's why they all open for shorter hours on a Sunday, but it tends to be 11 till 6, so it'll get busier later. You can't get away from that man. He was Queen Victoria's husband and consort, and he died at the age of 42 and left her a widow for 40 years, so she had plenty of time during her 40-year widowhood to make sure we didn't forget him. So that's why we got so many things named after him everywhere. Now as we come along here, this is Victoria Street, and we have our main Roman Catholic church along here. Now just coming up on the left hand side is a branch of that well-known Scottish chain of restaurants, McDonald's. They're Scottish, are they? Scottish name. Look left and you'll see the cathedral just here in the gap. Richard? Yep. That's it. There we are. There it is. Yeah, isn't that nice? So that's Westminster Cathedral, and Westminster Cathedral is the main Roman Catholic church in the city. So if you need to go to Mass, that's where you can go, in there. And it's not an old church. It's a church that was completed in 1903. So it's not like some of the ancient churches that we have. So Westminster Cathedral. Don't confuse it with Westminster Abbey, which you're going to see later and take a photograph of later. So this is Victoria. This is a busy part of central London. It's one of the main stations here in the city, just coming up on our left, through the gap in the buildings, and you can see a little clock peering up above the building work here, the roadworks. Can you see a black little clock with a red and gold face just coming up on the left-hand side? Look at that there. That's Little Ben, not Big Ben, Little Ben. So you can't see Big Ben because it's covered in scaffolding, but you can see Little Ben just above the roadworks there. So that's it was a present from the French, actually, Little Ben. We don't get many presents from the French. They don't give us very much except a headache. But the clock was a gift for looking after the French resistance and giving them sanctuary during the Second World War. So that's why the clock was given after the Second World War as a gift, a thank you to London for doing that. Now we're crossing Buckingham Palace Road here. All of this area on our right is brand new. You can see the office complex and all the restaurants here on our immediate left. They demolished all of Victoria a few years ago, built this brand new area on the right, which is very nice actually. A lot of nice little restaurants in there, and but most of it's in the open air, so it's a bit chilly at the moment to sit outside. There you can see down to your right, lots of little restaurants in that section, that quarter. So we're going to go up towards Hyde Park Corner, one of the big grand junctions here in central London. So Victoria Station, trains to the seaside, down to Brighton, London on Sea. That's where you'd go to get the train down to the coast. And well, we'll leave Victoria behind us and head up towards Hyde Park Corner. How are we doing temperature-wise? Everyone warm enough back there? Yeah, it's about right. Too warm? Well, adjust that a degree or so if you're too warm. Now guys, as we come across the next junction, have a look over to your front right and you can see a yellow wall. Bricks with spikes, barbed wire and security cameras running all along the top of the wall. Can you see that there on your right hand side now? And that is the garden wall of Buckingham Palace. That's the Queen's back garden you're looking at over the top of the wall. See all the trees? She's got a fair few trees in there, hasn't she? But the actual perimeter wall, lots of security, which was put there quite a number of years ago now by Her Majesty. She ordered all that razor wire and spikes to stop Prince Philip, her husband, escaping and sleeping in. Because in his younger days, he was always out and about around the city and she never knew where he was. So in order to make sure he didn't just get out, she put that there. But he's now 96 and he can't get over the wall anymore, so that's it's to keep us out these days rather than to keep him in. But if you're wondering why it's like it, that's why it is. So that's the Queen's back garden. And now look, we're coming up to this big junction here called Hyde Park Corner. Lots of traffic. Not so much on a Sunday, thankfully. And if you look over to your right, you can see a lovely stone structure. And look on the top of it, you can see an angel coming down onto a chariot. A big bronze quadriga on the top of the arch. And that is the Wellington Arch, which is dedicated to the Battle of Waterloo in 1815. And the Duke of Wellington, who was, of course, the man who led the Allied forces against Napoleon. Napoleon's last stand, defeated him at Waterloo in Belgium in 1815, and that's the memorial to it. We'll see it later because we'll be coming back through here a little bit later on, so we'll see it all again. On the right, London's largest park, or central London's largest park. Look over to your right and you can see the corner of a 600-acre green space, an oblong of green on the central London map, the largest one you see, and that is Hyde Park you're looking at there now. So that's the southeastern corner of Hyde Park, and we're going to run along the southern edge of the park in a minute because we're going to go out towards Kensington, leaving Westminster behind us briefly as we head out west towards the district of Kensington, not the borough of Kensington. Now this area we're coming into now is Knightsbridge. Knightsbridge is it's sort of the playground of the super rich, this area, and you can see that from the hotels, the shops, the stores that you see around you in a minute. This lovely hotel on the right-hand side has just been recently restored, the outside of the building. Isn't it looking good? That's the Mandarin Oriental Hotel. There it is on the right. It's looking lovely there. It's a very fine old London hotel with great views over Hyde Park on the other side. So it's one of London's real classic hotels. Next to it on the right, these modern blocks adjoining it. These were some of the most expensive city apartments ever built. They were going for £20 million each back in 2012. And prices have gone up considerably since then, so I'm not sure what they're trading at now. But when they were first built, there are 87 of them in the 4 blocks, and there are penthouse apartments on the top of each block, so 4 huge penthouse apartments, and they were going for over £100 million each. Can you imagine paying that? Now look, there's the Rolex shop there. Do you see the Rolex watches there? And a little bit further along you've got McLaren sports cars just coming up now on the right hand side. See that blue one there in the window and one on the wall? So if you want to buy a pint of milk and a loaf of bread, if you live in there, it's hopeless, you can't get it for at all. But if you want to buy a Rolex or a McLaren, it's fine, no problem. Have a look over to your right and you can see where the horses live. These are the stables for the horses of the household cavalry. In fact, sometimes you can see a horse up there having a bit of air, but I can see the bedding up there on the concrete balcony on the right, just up there. That's where those beautiful big black horses are stabled, because this on the right hand side is the headquarters, the London headquarters of the household cavalry. And as you can see, if you look on the banner there on the fence, you can see they're recruiting. So if you fancy a change in career and want to be a trooper of the household cavalry, why don't you apply? You can apply online. They take applications online, so give it a go. The troopers live in this tower block coming up on the right. You can see a tower block there. That's the accommodation for... They're not called soldiers, they're called troopers. They're troopers of the household cavalry. And the horses are kept there as well, just in that little area back where we first saw. So coming to the end of the household cavalry barracks, and again views of Hyde Park. You can see better into the park now. Looking up towards, they've got Winter Wonderland in there at this time of year. If you want, you can't quite see it from here, it's too far over, but they have a huge sort of winter fun fair, which takes place every year in the park, and it's called Winter Wonderland. It's full of very expensive rides, ice skating, an ice kingdom. It's got everything you could think of to entertain a family, but it's the fastest way to spend cash that I've ever met. I've ever known. So if you go in there, it's free to get in, but when you're in there you spend a fortune very, very quickly. So give it a wide berth if you want to save some money. These lights here are right outside the Royal Geographical Society, and this lovely building is coming up on our left. Just across the lights you'll see 2 statues, one of Ernest Shackleton, who went to the Antarctic, and the other one of David Livingstone. So Shackleton's dressed for the cold and Livingstone's dressed for the tropics with his Bible in his hand. You'll see both of them. They were sponsored by the Royal Geographical Society. Shackleton, obviously, he's died in 1912, and Livingstone considerably earlier. But here they are, look on the left, the 2 statues. Shackleton, and here on your immediate left, leaning on his stick, is David Livingstone. Dr. Livingstone, I presume. So we are going to just pause here by the side of the road just for a moment, so you can have a look in the sunshine at the Albert Memorial. There it is, look, coming up on the right-hand side, a memorial to Prince Albert covered in gold leaf, and we're not getting out here, we're just going to pause, and then if you want to just take a photo through the window of it, then it always looks nice on a sunny morning. There we are, just pull up here for a second, that's great, thank you Richard, lovely. So you've got the Royal Albert Hall Concert Hall on the left, and you've got the Albert Memorial on the right. Isn't that nice? Now that is the most extravagant Victorian memorial you'll ever see, I think, isn't it? It was erected there in the early 1870s on the orders of Queen Victoria as a memorial to her beloved Albert. And if you look at it carefully, you can see Albert. It's a bronze statue. He's seated and he's holding a catalogue. And that catalogue is the catalogue of the Great Exhibition of 1851, which was held there on the site of that memorial. So that's why it was located there. Isn't it marvellous? Yeah. And the exhibition of 1851, that was in a crystal palace, a palace of glass and steel, which was built to house it. It was Albert's idea, and it was the first major expo they ever had. In fact, it was a showcase for Victorian engineering and design at its best, and that's where it was held in 1851. Made a lot of money. Anyway, that's great, Richard. When you're ready, all tight, everyone. We're making our way. This concert hall on the left is the Royal Albert Hall, and it's one of London's largest concert halls. It's perfectly circular. It's about 1/4 of a mile round in circumference, so just glance over your left shoulder and you can see it. It's a bit difficult to see because we're quite close to it. And the Royal Albert Hall was built at the same time as the Memorial in the early 1870s. So they have the Henry Wood Promenade concerts in the summertime, and all sorts of concerts of all types, all the way through the year. Now we are turning down into Queensgate. If you look through those gates on the right, that's Kensington Gardens now over there, and that takes you over to Kensington Palace. Let's turn into Queensgate. Does anyone ever remember a comedian called Benny Hill?
Yes.
If you look on the right, you'll see a circular blue plate on the wall at number 2. Just there as we're passing now, it says Benny Hill on the plate. Just there at number 2 on the wall at the back by the door. Well, that was where Benny Hill had his top floor apartment, right up until his death. He died in the late 80s, I think it was. It must have been that long ago now. And that was where he was a bit of a recluse, Benny Hill. So those of you who remember him, he was a good comedian, but like all good comedians, they can be sort of a bit morose and reclusive, can't they, sort of in their private life, and he was, and that's where he died, up there on the top floor of number 2 Queensgate. Blue plaques everywhere in London. Do look out for them. If you see a blue plaque, make sure you have a look and see if there's a name you recognise, because a lot of blue plaques will be to people you've heard of. To get your name on a blue plaque in London, there are 2 criteria. The first is you've got to be famous, and the second is you've got to be dead. I'm not sure in which order. Have a look at these buildings here on the right. These are typical Kensington townhouses. You can see where the front door is there underneath the 2 big columns. You can imagine, can't you, a single family dwelling back in the 19th century. But of course nowadays they're all split up into apartments, and a lot of them are commercial premises too. Keep looking right, there's a statue of the founder of the Boy Scout movement. Can you see? Robert Baden-Powell, and that's Baden-Powell House that he stands in front of. Baden-Powell founded the Boy Scout movement just over 100 years ago, and that is the main headquarters in London of the Scouting movement, and it also has some accommodation in there as well. So it's both accommodation and offices for the Scouting movement. Baden-Powell House. So you see the streets ahead of us, wide streets full of these huge townhouses built in the 19th century for wealthy families. Nowadays, as I say, commercial premises quite often. Some of them are embassies. Some of them are residential apartments, but no one owns a whole one. There are no family dwellings anymore. Too large. Now we are in South Kensington, and if you look to your left, you can see the Natural History Museum, which is one of 3 huge museums, all in a cluster here at South Kensington. Look at the detail on this building on the left. It was built in 1880. Purpose-built for natural history. They're restoring their railings, aren't they? Making a nice job of them. Look, they're red and gold. And look behind. Can you see the top of the drain pipes? There are carvings of animals coming out at you from the top of the drain pipes. Look between the windows, the dormer windows on the top floor. Huge carvings of animals. Purpose-built for natural history. And keep looking left. If you want something Christmassy, there's the Christmas tree. There is an ice rink, one of the many seasonal ice rinks that pop up here in London for the festive period. And that one at South, here in the gardens of the Natural History Museum, has been every year for the last 27 years. They've been putting it up in October, taking it down in January. So it'll be busy later when it opens. There'll be people skating around, drinking mulled wine, going on the carousel. Very festive. This museum on the left is the the Victoria and Albert Museum, the V&A. And if you want to see yet another statue of Albert, in stone this time, look left, there he is under the arch above the front door. So look to your left and there he is in his robes. That's the Victoria and Albert, the V&A as we call it. And that is the largest museum in London to art and design. So you like Fabergé, you like collections of anything really, they're all in there. So it's a great museum. So Natural History Museum, V&A, and the Science Museum is there as well. But you couldn't see that one because it was hidden by the Natural History Museum. This big church on our left is another Roman Catholic church. It's the Brompton Oratory. Look left and you'll see the entrance to it. And so this is one, like Westminster Cathedral that we saw earlier, a place where you can go to Mass, and built in 1880, the Brompton Oratory Church here in Knightsbridge, because look where we are. We are coming into one of London's premier shopping districts. It's a bit classy, this one. It's got lots of expensive shops. It's also got the famous Harrods department store. And as we come along here, you look on the right-hand side and you'll see a large brown building with red flags and Christmas decorations. That's Harrods of Knightsbridge. And so it's the focal point, really, of the area. But the side streets down here, Beecham Place, next one on the right, it's a beautiful little street with interesting shops all the way down on the right. That's Beecham Place. But on the main road here in Brompton Road, is Harrods. Opens on Sunday from 11:30 to 6, 11:30 to 6 p.m. on a Sunday. On weekdays, including Saturdays, it is 10 a.m. to 9 p.m. it opens. So you've got, there you go on the right, there's Harrods of Knightsbridge. Yeah. Do some window shopping, it's cheaper. You just look in the windows and spend nothing. There's the main entrance with the stylized Christmas trees on the top. The building itself was constructed in 1905, especially for Harrods, so it's purpose-built, and it's quite an Aladdin's cave, really. They have an underground station nearby. If you look to the right, you can see the underground symbol, the red circle and the blue band, and there's the underground station right next to it. So that's it. We have many big department stores in London, guys. We have many, and most of them are in Oxford Street. That's our main shopping street. But Knightsbridge, this district, has Harrods and Harvey Nichols, and I'll show you where Harvey Nichols is in a minute, because we're coming up back in a circle. We've gone around in a loop. We started at the top here by Burberry's, and we've come all the way around in a loop, and we've come back to where we started from. There we are. Burberry's main flagship store is this one on the left. Fairly new, and if you like the Burberry design, Burberry brand, there you go, that's their main store, main London flagship store. And as we come around the corner, there's your McLarens again, and your Rolexes at the bottom of these expensive apartment blocks. Number 1 Hyde Park, these addresses are called. That's quite an address, isn't it? There you go. Harvey Nichols, the other department store here in Knightsbridge, is on the right. They got some nice Christmas windows, and on the corner of Sloane Street here. Harvey Nicks, we call that one. Mr. Harvey and Mr. Nichols were linen drapers. They started a drapery store here in the 1850s in Knightsbridge, whereas Harrods was started by a tea merchant, because Charles Harrod was a grocer and a tea merchant. So one department store was originally a grocery store, the other one was originally a draper's. And they've grown to be two of London's most prestigious and well-known department stores. So let's leave Knightsbridge behind us. They are doing what they do so often here in London, keeping the front of a building and knocking everything down behind it. And if you look straight ahead of you, you can see this rather strange structure with scaffolding on it, and that is the front of the old building, just being propped up. Whereas you can see, if you look front right, you can see behind it, there's nothing but a big hole, and they're going to fill that in and build something new behind. So can you see just behind the girders there, if you look behind those iron girders, steel girders, you can see the old facade of the building, which is a good idea, isn't it, to keep the old frontage. And there we are. Let's come back up to Hyde Park Corner again. That's where we are.
Smile.
So there's a few people jogging in the park this morning, a few people cycling. They've got a place where you can ride a horse along there as well. I can't see any horses in there this morning, but it's a sandy track called Rotten Row where horses are exercising. So let's have another and better look this time at Hyde Park Corner as we come up to the junction. Look over to your right. Do you see this hotel entrance on the right? It's called the Lanesborough, and they're putting the Christmas tree, look, just up off the portico. And that's the most expensive hotel in London, the Lanesborough. You thought your hotel was, didn't you? The Park Plaza down there at Hercules Road, but no, it isn't. It's that one on the right, the Lanesborough, the most expensive hotel in London, and it's mostly suites in there. And they have each suite has its own butler, so you get your own butler. That's very good.
Wow. So why didn't they put us there?
I don't know. I have no idea why.
Next trip, next time.
You might have to pay a supplement.
How much does a room go for in that place? Do you have any idea?
Yeah, several £100 just for the basic one. The Lanesborough, it's called. It used to be a hospital, actually. It used to be a hospital many years ago. Have a look out to your front right in the middle of the road. That archway we saw before, that's the Wellington Arch. You can see some people about to cycle through it or run through it. So that's dedicated to the Battle of Waterloo and the defeat of Napoleon back in 1815. The Duke of Wellington actually lived here at Hyde Park Corner right up until his death in 1852. So after the battle, 2 years later, he bought this lovely house on the left. You can see it. It's made of a golden stone, has 4 massive columns, and it's open to the public every day but Monday and Tuesday. So it's 5 days a week. You could go inside, and here it is coming up on the left behind the pale green railings. It is full of beautiful Portuguese, Spanish and French works of art, the spoils of war, because the Duke of Wellington, when he landed in Portugal, he routed the French through Portugal, Spain, across the Pyrenees, through France, ending up in Belgium, fighting Napoleon at the Battle of Waterloo. And all of the spoils of war that he accumulated en route are in there, on display, in Apsley House. That was his London home. So here we are. This is the corner with Piccadilly. That's Piccadilly, the street down to your left. You'll be into Piccadilly. We'll see a little bit of that later on our travels. But for now, let's go back round past the Queen's Garden Wall and make a stop for a photograph of Westminster Abbey. That's what we're going to do in a moment. So let's go round the junction, past the Wellington Arch. There are lots of memorials in the middle there. You can see the Australia War Memorial just there on the right, that green granite wall. I don't think we've got anyone from Australia aboard, have we, today? No. But that's the Australian War Memorial, and they have the Anzac Day commemorations there each year at that memorial. And now, sun in our eyes as we head down towards the side of the palace. The Queen hosts her garden parties in these gardens each year. In the early summer, there are 3 major garden parties, and the garden parties are well attended. About 8,000 people go to each garden party. So when people go to a garden party, they really do dress up. And if they think they're going to have a nice private chat with the Queen over a cup of tea and a slice of cake, forget it. Because there are 7,999 other people there with you, all vying for the Queen's attention. But what happens is they invite people who've done something worthy, plus 1 guest. So you have 4,000 people who've done something worthy and 4,000 people who haven't. And they're all in there having tea with the Queen in the garden. And needless to say, I've never had an invite because I've never done anything worthy. I don't know. Richard, you go most years, don't you? Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be 20th year.
20th year doing the washing up. That's right. Exactly. Julianne, have you ever been to a garden
No,
party?
but my granddad went several times.
Ooh,
Because he was World War One. He was shot in World War
A
One.
World War One
yeah.
veteran,
Yes.
and that's it. If you've done something worthy and important, and heroic, charitable, built up a business, you've done something, then you would get an invite to a Queen's Garden party. So it's an honour to get an invite, really. And it always rains, doesn't it? It always rains, because it's always in the afternoon. They always have an afternoon thunderstorm. One lady one year, her hat, she had a metal framed hat, and her hat got struck by lightning in the garden. She was sitting there sipping her tea, trying to shelter, and the bolt of lightning came down, and it knocked her off her perch, so to speak. She survived, but it was quite a shock, I think, for her. The tea went everywhere. Here on the left-hand side...
Did it curl her hair?
I think it did curl her hair. What was left of it. Anyway... Here on the left-hand side is the place where the Queen's carriages and carriage horses are kept. It's called the Royal Mews, and if you look just as we turn, you'll see an archway, an entrance to the Royal Mews, and inside there are stables where the beautiful carriage horses are kept, and also all the carriages are looked after and maintained. Just here on the left through that arch, there's a courtyard through the arch. That is it. So nothing to do with the Queen's Cats, Royal Mews. It's to do with horses and carriages. And this is the riding school. Over the wall here, you can see the arched windows. The windows are open because it's an indoor riding school. It's a bit horsey in there, so get a bit of fresh air in the morning. Open the windows. And that was built in the middle of the 18th century. For King George III, and it was where Queen Victoria watched all her 9 children learn to ride. The Queen used to practice riding side saddle in there before her birthday parade, the Trooping of the Colour. So it's been well used over the years, the riding school at the Royal Mews. And the Royal Mews is open every day. You can't go into Buckingham Palace, but you can go into the Royal Mews. It's open to the public each day at this time of the year. Look left, there's the side of the palace, look, and we'll be back here later. And I can assure you that when we next see this view, there will be thousands of people hanging around as well, just in through these gates. So if you look there to your left, you can see the roadway, and over the next few hours, people will congregate there, in there, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, to watch that, just to watch for a moment, a minute, the soldiers march by with the band, or the sailors, as it's going to be this morning. So it'll be busy later, I'll warn you of that. So let's go down to Tothill Street, and that's the street coming up now to our left. We're going to make a brief stop here, guys, and it's not a coffee stop, it's not a toilet stop, that's at St Paul's. This is simply a photo stop for you to have a nice photograph of Westminster Abbey and see that famous view of Westminster Abbey, the two West Towers. So as we come down past the Wellington Barracks, you can see a soldier there in uniform. He's there looking after the entrance to the Wellington Barracks. That's where the Queen's Guard are based when they come off duty, and when the guards come on duty later, that's where they'll march from. They have a parade ground on the far side of the building overlooking St James's Park. And let's go down a little bit further, see if we can find a spot to pull in.
Far down we can
Yeah, as far as you can. That'll be great, Richard. Thank you. See what we can do. Now, if you bring your cameras when you come out, remember where you're seated, obviously. Bring your camera. We'll only be here for just 10 minutes, and we're going to just walk to the corner. You don't need to cross any roads, just walk to the corner and get a photograph of the Abbey. It's our coronation church, where kings and queens of England have been crowned since 1066. It was where the Queen was crowned in 1953, 65 years ago. And it's a huge Anglican church. Bill, just walk down. Walking is the building that gets fatter as it gets higher. Most buildings get narrower, don't they, as they get higher, but that one doesn't. Directly ahead of us, against the sky, a modern building completed in 2013, the walkie-talkie, because from one angle it looks walkie-talkie shaped, and that's where it got its name from. It's just a big office block. That's basically what it is. A lot of people say it's a bit too ugly. It's ugly because it's too big against the sky, too wide at the top. But it has a wonderful bar right on the top. It's called the Sky Garden, and you can go right up and have drinks and look over the city from both sides. It's really quite nice, actually. It's called the Sky Garden. Public space on the top. Now we are crossing at the lights, this little crossing. St Paul's Cathedral is up the hill to the left, and the Millennium Footbridge is here to the right. So if you look between the buildings to the right, after the red brick school building, you'll see the bridge going, it's a footbridge going across the river called the Millennium Bridge. See a lot of people walking on it there? And that bridge featured in Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince. That was the one that was destroyed when Death Eaters swooped down onto the bridge to kill the Muggles. I don't know if anyone's a fan of the Harry Potter stories, but the Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince movie, the film, that was when the bridge was destroyed by the Death Eaters swooping down. But as you can see, Warner Brothers paid for it to be put back up again, so it's all right now. So up ahead, lots of tall buildings. The financial district. The City of London is one of the world's biggest, largest financial districts as we make our way into Parliament Square and down into Whitehall. This last building on the left, Methodist Central Hall, or Westminster Central Hall as it's often called, built as a huge prayer house for Wesleyan Methodists in the early part of the 20th century. So this huge building, and it is a huge building inside, is the largest Methodist prayer house in the world as far as I'm aware. And there you can see the flag there flying over the door. Every Wesleyan Methodist was invited to give a guinea, a pound and a shilling, and that's how it was funded in the early years of the 20th century. Wesleyan Methodists. Here's the entrance to the Abbey. Now, Westminster Abbey is a big Anglican church, Church of England Abbey, of course. It was originally a Benedictine Abbey. That's why it's called Westminster Abbey, because it was the church of the Benedictine Abbey. That went, of course, in Henry VIII's time, and we have now the Abbey Church, and there is the north side of it, where kings and queens, 38 coronations of kings and queens of England have taken place in there, in the Abbey. And as we come into Parliament Square, lots of statues of statesmen. We have Nelson Mandela on the right, holding out his hand. We've got an American president on the left. Look, there's Abraham Lincoln. Look, there he is, standing in front of his chair. And that's a copy of the statue in Lincoln Park, Chicago, which has been here for many, many years. And as we come round the square, can you see what's happened to Big Ben, the clock tower on Parliament? It's covered in scaffolding, because for 3.5 years, they are spending time and money restoring the tower. So that's Parliament, and Churchill's statue there just on the corner, looking over towards Parliament on the right, Churchill on the corner, and the Parliament buildings with all that scaffolding on the clock tower. So that's Big Ben, which is in there somewhere, the bell at the top, but not bonging at the moment. The bell has been switched off while the maintenance work is being done, so you won't even hear Big Ben. That's the nearest pub to Downing Street on the right. That's Theresa May, our Prime Minister. That's her local. She wants a gin and orange, and she goes. I don't think. This is the National War Memorial in the centre of the street, and can you see they've got a little fence around where all the poppy wreaths are, and that was from 2 weeks ago, Remembrance Sunday, Veterans Day, Remembrance Sunday, and the wreaths are still there, all the poppies, to remember those of the 2 world wars and other conflicts too. Look left and you'll see Downing Street. The black gates here, a little side street, and down there at the far end is where the Prime Minister lives at number 10. You can see the car at the very far end parked, and that is a dead end in more ways than one, Downing Street. Especially if you're Theresa May, it is. And there we are. So that's where the Prime Minister has her official residence, number 10 Downing Street, a little side street off Whitehall, this being the street, the thoroughfare of government ministries. And as we come halfway down, we're going to turn right, outside Horse Guards. Here on our left, a lovely little collection of buildings with a forecourt, and that's called Horse Guards. There's a big parade ground at the back, if you look through those open gates there on the left. Yeah, there we are. And we'll turn and go down Horse Guards Avenue, which is a short avenue leading to the river. It takes us past the Ministry of Defence. So if you look out to your front right, and what they're doing here, building some large structure. But if you look to your front right, you can see the entrance into the Ministry of Defence, the headquarters of the Armed Services. The doors are firmly shut this morning on a Sunday as we make our way down to the embankment. And we will see again the Thames, London's river, and this time you can peer through the trees and you can see the London Eye, that huge observation wheel. Anyone been on it?
No.
No? It's a magnificent view from the top, particularly on a day like today. And for those of you who can't quite see it yet because you're at the back, wait till we turn left onto the embankment and then look under the trees and you can see the capsules of the London Eye. Maybe some of you might like to go on it either later, or if you're returning to London at any point, it's going to be there. They said, like in Paris with the Eiffel Tower, it's a temporary structure. It will only be here for just a few years. But similar to the Eiffel Tower in Paris, over well, not quite 100 and odd years later, but certainly 20 odd years later, it's still there. So we have the London Eye taking thousands of people round each and every day for a wonderful view. 443 feet you are when you're on the top of the Eye, going over the top and down. It's not for thrills and spills, it's for a nice sedate journey of 30 minutes to take you once round on the London Eye for a view. So it's rather nice. £26 is the cheapest walk-on ticket if you want to buy a ticket for it. It's open today from 11 until 6, 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. So that's the times. Last entry is 6 o'clock. And that's dark, obviously, because it's dark at 4:15, isn't it now? 4:15, 4:30 is dark. Now let's drive along past the Thames, and you can see Waterloo Bridge out in front of you, and the Dome of St Paul's on the other side of Waterloo Bridge, looking all the way around the curve in the river. Here on our immediate right, on the riverside, is an ancient piece of Egypt, 3,500 years old, the obelisk coming up on your right, carved in Alexandria in Egypt 3,500 years ago, and there on the embankment with two bronze sphinx on either side. You can see them staring at the plinth. They should be facing the other way, guarding it, but they put them the wrong way round. They've never bothered to put them back the right way round. But that's Cleopatra's Needle, the ancient obelisk on the banks of the Thames. It's been here since the 1870s on display. Waterloo Bridge is the highest, longest and busiest traffic bridge across the River Thames in central London, and we're about to go under a section of it now. So Waterloo Bridge takes us towards the City of London. And if you look on the left, you can see Somerset House. Now this building used to be on the riverside when it was first built in the 1780s, and you can see where you could have sailed a boat. If you look left, you see the low wide arch with Old Father Thames carved on the keystone there. Well, that was right on the river, so at high tide you could sail in through those arches. But of course this road has been artificially created on an embankment which was created in the 1850s, opened in 1860 and called Victoria Embankment. So it's left all the buildings all high and dry here on the left hand side, including Somerset House. Now we are about to enter the City of London, and we do that at a point where there are two silver dragons on plinths on the side of the road to mark the boundary, and they're coming up just a little bit ahead of us now, so we will see where that boundary line is. As we are approaching it, there is a white ship moored just on the right hand side in the river, and that's called the Wellington. It is the Guildhall of the Guild of Master Mariners. The Honourable Company of Master Mariners has their Guildhall, their meeting place here on the ship, and have done so since the late 1940s when the ship came to London, and has never budged since. So there it is on the right, the Wellington. Prince Philip, the Queen's husband, is the man, the admiral of the order. Here are the dragons. Look, left and right, you see they're holding a shield with a red cross. We're just passing them now, and that means we've entered the square mile, London's original Roman square mile, and the district is Temple. Looking left, you can see the beautiful buildings there in brick and stone, gardens. That is where barristers, higher court advocates, are trained and where they practice law, in an area called Temple, named after the Knights Templars who originally owned the land until it was confiscated from them in the 14th century, and it was rented out to lawyers, and their lawyers are still there all these years later. Temple. Now we're going to go away from the river for a moment. We're going up the hill towards St Paul's Cathedral, and you can see they're doing a lot of work on the riverside here. They're putting a new sewer pipe. That's what it is. So it's obstructing our views at the moment, looking out into the river. But this area in front of us is called Blackfriars, and there was at one time a Dominican friary here, Blackfriars Monastery. That was closed by Henry VIII in the 16th century, but the area retains the name Blackfriars, with Blackfriars Bridge, that's the bridge to the right. You've also got Blackfriars Station, which is directly ahead of us with the glass frontage, and a lovely little pub called the Blackfriar, which is one of the tiniest pubs in London, and you'll see it as we cross the junction there, the old building with the golden clock face and a monk on the wall. You'll see it in a moment or two. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go up the hill towards St Paul's Cathedral. Richard's going to drop us off at the back of the cathedral, and we're going to walk through to the main square beside the church. There I'll show you where there are toilets to use. I'll show you where you can just, if it's available, just walk up the steps and have a little look inside the church if you wish, and we will then rendezvous to meet Richard at a different place. But time is quite tight because the guard change is on today, so I'll give you a nice clear time to meet.
Guys, keep together, won't you, because we're not going that way. They took it away because it was causing traffic problems, and they beautifully restored it about 15 years ago here at the entrance to the square. So it's rather nice, isn't it? St Christopher End. Behind us in the gate, St Paul's Cathedral, the largest church in London with the famous dome up there. It is. It's a Christopher Wren design. It was built between 1675 and 1710. So it was built over 35 years to replace the old one damaged in the Great Fire of London a few years earlier, in 1666. So that's our largest church. And as I said to you on the coach, if you're old enough like me, you'll remember that's where the royal wedding was in 1981 of Charles and Diana, the only royal wedding they ever had in there. So it's not a royal church, it's the nation's church. When you look through the gate, you can see a little white gazebo there on the steps.
Yeah.
That's the security bag check. So if you do go in, I wouldn't dare take you in on a Sunday. I'd be struck off as a guide, so I mustn't go anywhere near. But if you go in just on your own, without me, then they'll be okay about it. And you could just stand in at the back. But if you've got a bag, that's where they serve your bag. Here in the square, you've got a little grocery store. If anyone wants a chocolate bar or anything over there, that's the Sainsbury's local. Okay. The toilets are here, costing 50 pence. And you're meeting me back here at this very spot. See where that little olive tree is on the corner? I stand by the tree there, just there, where you can hear. And you've got to be on time, guys, because we've got to get to the guard change. So the time will be that we meet here at 5 to 10.
There we go. Hear those bells ringing? That's what he wanted to get done before the bells started ringing. Hearing the bells. That's where it's coming from up there.
Right, which is going to turn right down the hill, but you look left and you'll see the statue of Queen Anne, and she was Queen of England when St Paul's was completed in 1710. It's Queen Anne statue, and the grey steps behind her, where Feed the Birds, Tuppence a Bag was sung in, Mary Poppins, of course. And it's a lovely view of the church as we turn. Did you get inside, any of you? Yeah? You went in, had a quick look in the back. That's that's nice that they allow that for people, because I know you can't go walking round inside, but at least you can have a little peek at the back. So there we are, on the left, as we turn onto Ludgate Hill. Squeeze down the hill. So St Paul's is on the highest point in the City of London, on the top of Ludgate Hill. There are lots of little churches here. If you look on the right where the number 11 bus is, you can see a church squeezed between the sushi bar and the pub. There's one on that. And that's Sir Christopher Wren's church as well, St Martin's.
Good location.
And in fact, Sir Christopher Wren was... All right, everyone? Sir Christopher Wren was a prolific church builder. He designed 50 churches in addition to St Paul's Cathedral in the years that followed the Great Fire of London of 1666. So we originally had 50 churches by Sir Christopher Wren in the square mile of the City of London to replace the fire-damaged churches from 1666. But we don't have that anymore. We've got 23 of his original 50 churches. So over the years, for many reasons, a lot of those churches have disappeared, and 23 remain. There's one on the hill there, St Martin's. So as we come down to the bottom of the hill, we're going into Fleet Street, and that means we cross the bed of an old river, the River Fleet. You can see just down ahead of us, there's traffic flowing along in front of us, and that was where the river used to flow, down into the Thames at Blackfriars. But the Victorians didn't want the River Fleet anymore. It got too small, it was a bit of a nuisance, so they put it in a pipe and built the road on the top of it, and so it's now Farringdon Road leading down to the river. So let's cross over where the River Fleet used to run into Fleet Street, which is dead ahead, and that takes us back towards Westminster. We're heading westwards now to our next stop at St James's Palace, where we'll get out and walk up to see the changing of the guard. So this street here was originally full of newspaper offices, journalists, printers. This lovely black glossy building on the right-hand side has been recently restored. It was built as the headquarters of Express newspapers in the 1920s. So it's very Art Deco, isn't it? Look at the chrome trim there on it. And the print works was in the basement, huge basement, but now it's occupied by other commercial organisations now. Keep looking right, and there's a pub called the Old Cheshire Cheese. See the black paintwork and the big lamp on the right? The Old Cheshire Cheese was is one of the oldest pubs in the City of London, and it was always frequented by Dr. Johnson, Samuel Johnson, who famously said, "When a man is tired of London, he is tired of life." Dr. Samuel Johnson was responsible. His most important thing he achieved in his life, as far as we're all concerned now, is to publish the world's first English dictionary, 1755. 44,000 words he and his scribes were able to define, and the very first English dictionary was published here in Fleet Street, 1755, by Dr. Samuel Johnson. Living at the back of the pub as he did, he would always go into the Old Cheshire Cheese in the evening for a pint and a pie. That was how he sustained himself. We'll see a statue of him in a minute. So as we progress along Fleet Street, we're heading up towards where the old city gate used to stand. The gate we saw by St Paul's Cathedral. It was taken down in Victorian times and replaced with a column of stone and a big dragon on the top where the gate used to be. So if you look ahead of you in the middle of the road, coming up in the distance, is that exact spot. Just beside it to the right, a very grand building with stone walls and turrets and towers. That's the High Court, the civil courts, the main law courts in the city, just to the right of the monument. So Fleet Street, the old street of ink, the old street of newspaper offices, they've all moved out and relocated elsewhere now. So it's mostly lawyers' offices and legal bookshops and things like that around here now because of the High Court and the proximity to Temple, just down to the left where the barristers' chambers are. So we're about to re-enter Westminster. Here, look in the middle of the road, there is where the gateway used to be. Temple Bar, that's it. And keep looking right, and there you can see a very grand entrance into the High Court, the Royal Courts of Justice. That was opened in 1882 by Queen Victoria. It's a temple to the law. Here's Dr. Johnson's statue. Look right behind the church. He's holding his dictionary. Look, there he is. Look on the right. Yeah. And Dr. Johnson stands just behind the Church of St Clement Danes. This is the Royal Air Force Church on the right, and that's why you have the two Air Chief Marshals statues there on your right. To the one furthest away from us is Arthur Harris, head of Bomber Command, and the one closest to us on the right is Hugh Dowding, and he was head of Fighter Command during the Battle of Britain in 1940. So that's the Royal Air Force Church behind them. They stand in front of the RAF Church. Australia House, a very grand entrance there, looking over to our front right. That's the Australian High Commission. You can see it written twice, once on either side of the door on the wall. Australia House, built in 1918, and that's the Australian High Commission. Here on the left, where the red flags are flying, that's one of London's major universities. We've got 5 major universities in central London, and that's King's College, or part of King's College over on the left, which was opened as a rival to Oxford and Cambridge in 1829. So we didn't have a London university really until the early 19th century, because we had Oxford and Cambridge, which are located out of the city, of course. Look through the arches to the left and see the Christmas tree and the ice rink in the courtyard of Somerset House. Look left through those arches, see the Christmas tree in there? And the ice rink, which is in the middle, just like at the Natural History Museum, a seasonal ice rink where people could go skating around the Christmas tree. That one's sponsored by Fortnum and Mason's, the Queen's Grocers, which is located in Piccadilly. But they sponsor the event, the ice rink and the tree. Look out to your right and you'll see some of the theatres. There's Lion King at the Lyceum Theatre with the yellow banners on the right. You see just by the Wellington pub on the right. That's been playing there to packed houses since 1999. So for the last 18 years or more, Disney's Lion King has played at the Lyceum Theatre. And we have so many theatres in this little area. Up to the right around Covent Garden, theatres galore. In fact, there's one down to the left.
Whoa.
Ooh. Is that? Someone's not looking where they're going out there. Look left and you'll see the entrance to London's Savoy Hotel. The Savoy Hotel and the Savoy Theatre, where Dreamgirls is the production at the moment, is down to the left. This little side turning here. The Savoy was opened in 1889 and was the first 5-star hotel in London. But the theatre opened 7 years earlier, and the profits paid for the hotel. So look left, and you'll see where the Christmas trees are on the corner. Look down that little side street, and there is the Savoy, looking very Christmassy as well. The next street on the right is Southampton Street, and that takes you up to Covent Garden, which is where London's fruit and vegetable market was once upon a time, and the old stone buildings at the top, all traffic-free, lots of street performers, lots of little bars and restaurants and specialist shops. It's a lovely area to just watch the world go by and have a wander around. Covent Garden, it's called, and it's all part of London's busy West End. That's where we are now, the West End. Theatres, bars, restaurants. It's a huge area where people go shop, eat and be merry. Lots of theatres though, over 30 of them, all within walking distance of one another. Have a look on the left, we're coming up to Charing Cross Station, a small commuter station, but with a very grand memorial in the forecourt. So just behind this tree, coming up on the left, look at that stone monument. It's called the Charing Cross, and it comes from Dear Queen, the French for Dear Queen, Chérenne, and that's where the name Charing came from. And it commemorates the wife of King Edward I, Eleanor of Castile. When she died, the king mourned her death and had crosses erected to her memory, and that was one of them, the Charing Cross, the Dear Queen's Cross, hence the name of the station. Here's Trafalgar Square, our biggest public square, and if you look out to your right, you'll see Nelson's Column with 4 bronze lions guarding the plinth, and there, 167 feet high, is the stone statue of Lord Nelson on the top. Nelson's Column in Trafalgar Square on your right-hand side. Now look ahead of you and you'll see 3 arches with a red tarmacked road leading up to Buckingham Palace. Can you see to the left through those arches? That's Admiralty Arch, and that's the beginning of the main processional avenue, the Mall. Over to your right, the National Gallery. That's the building with the red banners between the columns. And is anyone from Canada here? Yep. Have a look to your front right and you will see Canada House with lots of Canadian flags flying. And that is the Canadian High Commission, which is here in Trafalgar Square on the western side of the square. So there we have Canada House, recently restored actually, just done a lot of work on it, so we're very nice inside now. Keep looking right, there's America's last king coming up. That's King George III. He's on a horse, Queen Victoria's grandfather. He was King of England almost as long as she was Queen. 64 years. She, and 60 years he. Let's go round the corner now into Pall Mall. I always call George III America's last king because he was King of England between 1760 and 1820, so during the time of independence. If you look to your left, you'll see Waterloo Place, and there is a lovely golden statue above the door of that building on the front left. It's a club, a gentleman's club. All of these are gentlemen's clubs along here on the left, but not those sort of gentlemen's clubs, if you're wondering. They're respectable. We've got those sort of gentlemen's clubs, they're up in Soho. These ones here are ancient institutions. The one with the flower boxes underneath the windows there, that's the Travellers Club. And the next one here, with the green door and the 2 big lamps, that's the Reform Club. And that's where Phileas Fogg was given the challenge to go around the world in 80 days from the Reform Club. Coming along a little further with a blue flag, the Royal Automobile Club. So these are all clubs originally for gentlemen. Now, ladies are allowed to be full members. A bit further down if you
Yes, I see them.
Yeah. But they're all private clubs, as I say, private members clubs, but transformed in recent years with ladies allowed to be full members of a gentleman's club. It's the Oxford and Cambridge Club, this one on the left with the 2 double columns here. Now we're getting out here, guys, so bring everything you need, wrap up warm, bring your cameras. We're going to strike out from here, and we're not coming back here. We're going to meet Richard on the other side. Richard's going to turn right down the hill, but you look left and you'll see the statue of Queen Anne, and she was Queen of England when St Paul's was completed in 1710. It's Queen Anne statue, and the grey steps behind her, where Feed the Birds, Tuppence a Bag was sung in, Mary Poppins, of course. And it's a lovely view of the church as we turn. Did you get inside, any of you? Yeah? You went in, had a quick look in the back? That's that's nice that they allow that for people, because I know you can't go walking round inside, but at least you can have a little peek at the back. So there we are, on the left, as we turn onto Ludgate Hill. Squeeze down the hill. So St Paul's is on the highest point in the City of London, on the top of Ludgate Hill. There are lots of little churches here. If you look on the right where the number 11 bus is, you can see a church squeezed between the sushi bar and the pub. There's one of them. And that's Sir Christopher Wren's church as well, St Martin's.
Good location.
And in fact, Sir Christopher Wren was... All right, everyone? Sir Christopher Wren was a prolific church builder. he designed 50 churches in addition to St Paul's Cathedral in the years that followed the Great Fire of London of 1666. So we originally had 50 churches by Sir Christopher Wren in the square mile of the City of London to replace the fire-damaged churches from 1666. But we don't have that anymore. We've got 23 of his original 50 churches. So over the years, for many reasons, a lot of those churches have disappeared, and 23 remain. There's one on the hill there, St Martin's. So as we come down to the bottom of the hill, we're going into Fleet Street, and that means we cross the bed of an old river, the River Fleet. You can see just down ahead of us, there's traffic flowing along in front of us, and that was where the river used to flow, down into the Thames at Blackfriars. But the Victorians didn't want the River Fleet anymore. It got too small, it was a bit of a nuisance, so they put it in a pipe and built the road on the top of it, and so it's now Farringdon Road leading down to the river. So let's cross over where the River Fleet used to run into Fleet Street, which is dead ahead, and that takes us back towards Westminster. We're heading westwards now to our next stop at St James's Palace, where we'll get out and walk up to see the changing of the guard. So this street here was originally full of newspaper offices, journalists, printers. This lovely black glossy building on the right-hand side has been recently restored. It was built as the headquarters of Express newspapers in the 1920s. So it's very Art Deco, isn't it? Look at the chrome trim there on it. And the print works was in the basement, huge basement, but now it's occupied by other commercial organisations now. Keep looking right, and there's a pub called the Old Cheshire Cheese. See the black paintwork and the big lamp on the right? The Old Cheshire Cheese is one of the oldest pubs in the City of London, and it was always frequented by Dr. Johnson, Samuel Johnson, who famously said, "When a man is tired of London, he is tired of life." Dr. Samuel Johnson was responsible. His most important thing he achieved in his life, as far as we're all concerned now, is to publish the world's first English dictionary, 1755. 44,000 words he and his scribes were able to define, and the very first English dictionary was published here in Fleet Street, 1755, by Dr. Samuel Johnson. Living at the back of the pub as he did, he would always go into the Old Cheshire Cheese in the evening for a pint and a pie. That was how he sustained himself. We'll see a statue of him in a minute. So as we progress along Fleet Street, we're heading up towards where the old city gate used to stand. The gate we saw by St Paul's Cathedral. It was taken down in Victorian times and replaced with a column of stone and a big dragon on the top where the gate used to be. So if you look ahead of you in the middle of the road, coming up in the distance, is that exact spot. Just beside it to the right, a very grand building with stone walls and turrets and towers. That's the High Court, the civil courts, the main law courts in the city, just to the right of the monument. So Fleet Street, the old street of ink, the old street of newspaper offices, they've all moved out and relocated elsewhere now. So it's mostly lawyers' offices and legal bookshops and things like that around here now because of the High Court and the proximity to Temple, just down to the left where the barristers' chambers are. So we're about to re-enter Westminster. Here, look in the middle of the road, there is where the gateway used to be. Temple Bar, that's it. And keep looking right, and there you can see a very grand entrance into the High Court, the Royal Courts of Justice. That was opened in 1882 by Queen Victoria. It's a temple to the law. Here's Dr. Johnson's statue. Look right behind the church. He's holding his dictionary. Look, there he is. Look on the right. Yeah. And Dr. Johnson stands just behind the Church of St Clement Danes. This is the Royal Air Force Church on the right, and that's why you have the two Air Chief Marshals statues there on your right. To the one furthest away from us is Arthur Harris, head of Bomber Command, and the one closest to us on the right is Hugh Dowding, and he was head of Fighter Command during the Battle of Britain in 1940. So that's the Royal Air Force Church behind them. They stand in front of the RAF Church. Australia House, a very grand entrance there, looking over to our front right. That's the Australian High Commission. You can see it written twice, once on either side of the door on the wall. Australia House, built in 1918, and that's the Australian High Commission. Here on the left, where the red flags are flying, that's one of London's major universities. We've got 5 major universities in central London, and that's King's College, or part of King's College over on the left, which was opened as a rival to Oxford and Cambridge in 1829. So we didn't have a London university really until the early 19th century, because we had Oxford and Cambridge, which are located out of the city, of course. Look through the arches to the left and see the Christmas tree and the ice rink in the courtyard of Somerset House. Look left through those arches, see the Christmas tree in there? And the ice rink which is in the middle, just like at the Natural History Museum, a seasonal ice rink where people can go skating around the Christmas tree. That one's sponsored by Fortnum and Mason's, the Queen's Grocers, which is located in Piccadilly. But they sponsor the event, the ice rink and the tree. Look out to your right and you'll see some of the theatres. There's Lion King at the Lyceum Theatre with the yellow banners on the right. You see just by the Wellington pub on the right. That's been playing there to packed houses since 1999. So for the last 18 years or more, Disney's Lion King has played at the Lyceum Theatre. And we have so many theatres in this little area. Up to the right around Covent Garden, theatres galore. In fact, there's one down to the left.
Whoa.
Ooh, is that? Someone's not looking where they're going out there. Look left and you'll see the entrance to London's Savoy Hotel. The Savoy Hotel and the Savoy Theatre, where Dreamgirls is the production at the moment, is down to the left. This little side turning here. The Savoy was opened in 1889 and was the first 5-star hotel in London. But the theatre opened 7 years earlier and the profits paid for the hotel. So look left and you'll see where the Christmas trees are on the corner. Look down that little side street and there is the Savoy, looking very Christmassy as well. The next street on the right is Southampton Street, and that takes you up to Covent Garden, which is where London's fruit and vegetable market was once upon a time, and the old stone buildings at the top, all traffic free, lots of street performers, lots of little bars and restaurants and specialist shops. It's a lovely area to just watch the world go by and have a wander around. Covent Garden it's called, and it's all part of London's busy West End. That's where we are now, the West End. Theatres, bars, restaurants, it's a huge area where people go to shop, eat and be merry. Lots of theatres though, over 30 of them, all within walking distance of one another. Have a look on the left, we're coming up to Charing Cross Station, a small commuter station, but with a very grand memorial in the forecourt. So just behind this tree, coming up on the left, look at that stone monument. It's called the Charing Cross, and it comes from Dear Queen, the French for Dear Queen, Chérenne, and that's where the name Charing came from, and it commemorates the wife of King Edward I, Eleanor of Castile. When she died, the king mourned her death and had crosses erected to her memory, and that was one of them, the Charing Cross, the Dear Queen's Cross, hence the name of the station. Here's Trafalgar Square, our biggest public square, and if you look out to your right you'll see Nelson's Column with 4 bronze lions guarding the plinth, and there, 167 feet high, is the stone statue of Lord Nelson on the top. Nelson's Column in Trafalgar Square on your right hand side. Now look ahead of you and you'll see 3 arches with a red tarmacked road leading up to Buckingham Palace. Can you see to the left through those arches? That's Admiralty Arch, and that's the beginning of the main processional avenue, the Mall. Over to your right, the National Gallery. That's the building with the red banners between the columns. And is anyone from Canada here? Yep. Have a look to your front right and you will see Canada House with lots of Canadian flags flying. And that is the Canadian High Commission, which is here in Trafalgar Square on the western side of the square. So there we have Canada House, recently restored actually, just done a lot of work on it, so we're very nice inside now. Keep looking right, there's America's last king coming up. That's King George III. He's on a horse, Queen Victoria's grandfather. He was King of England almost as long as she was Queen. 64 years. She, and 60 years he. Let's go round the corner now into Pall Mall. I always call George III America's last king because he was King of England between 1760 and 1820, so during the time of independence. If you look to your left, you'll see Waterloo Place, and there is a lovely golden statue above the door of that building on the front left. It's a club, a gentleman's club. All of these are gentlemen's clubs along here on the left, but not those sort of gentlemen's clubs, if you're wondering. They're respectable. We've got those sort of gentlemen's clubs, they're up in Soho. These ones here are ancient institutions. The one with the flower boxes underneath the windows there, that's the Travellers Club. And the next one here, with the green door and the 2 big lamps, that's the Reform Club. And that's where Phileas Fogg was given the challenge to go around the world in 80 days from the Reform Club. Coming along a little further with a blue flag, the Royal Automobile Club. So these are all clubs originally for gentlemen. Now, ladies are allowed to be full members. A bit further down if you But they're all private clubs, as I say, private members clubs, but transformed in recent years with ladies allowed to be full members of a gentleman's club. It's the Oxford and Cambridge Club, this one on the left with the two double columns here. Now we're getting out here, guys, so bring everything you need, wrap up warm, bring your cameras. We're going to strike out from here, and we're not coming back here. We're going to meet Richard on the other side of Buckingham.
That's it. You can always tell when there's going to be a changing of the guard because you get a lot of mounted police. And that's what we saw back there, the police on there, the mounted division of the Metropolitan Police. So some lovely police horses trotting around. Anyway, let's have a look where Prince Charles lives. There it is, the White Building adjoining St James's Palace. So you see where the bricks of St James's Palace come to an end, and there to the left you can see the slightly higher building with the flag on the top and a crown on the top of the flagpole. That's Clarence House, which is the official residence of the Prince of Wales and the Duchess of Cornwall, better known as Charles and Camilla. So they both live in there. And the house was built for the Duke of Clarence, who was later King William IV in the early 19th century. So it's a lovely early 19th century mansion, and it was most associated with the Queen Mother. In fact, it was her home for 50 years. The Queen's mother, Queen Elizabeth, was widowed when the Queen's father died in 1952. And so she left Buckingham Palace in 1952, she moved into Clarence House, and for the next 50 years that was her main home, Clarence House, because the Queen Mother died in 2002, 50 years later, at the grand old age of 101. So there you go. They've got longevity built in, our royal family.
Let me can you be live so I can make it? I know, but I hate to move it.
So we just have a moment here if anyone's taking a photograph just of the palace, and then we're all going to gather and move on from here in a second.
on TV.
So I hope you enjoyed that, and got some nice pictures. We saw the horses first, and then we saw the old guard, and we saw the new guard. So you've seen all three groups, which is good. And everyone now disperses, and some people will come back tomorrow and watch it all again. You'll probably be at Stonehenge by then, so you'll be seeing some ancient stones rather than the guards marching again tomorrow. Okie dokie. So the last leg of our sightseeing tour this morning is going to take us down towards the west, down by the river, and I'll show you a little bit more. Barracks is where the Queen's Guard go off duty, so we're just
Want to get to the hotel?
No, I'm sorry.
You're on Wi-Fi.
Well, we had to go because the driver was illegally parked, so I'm afraid you had to make your own way back to the hotel. We're at the end of the tour, and I'm sorry, but I was ringing you, and I couldn't get through, and because it's so noisy. I know, and likewise when you're running back. Maybe half an hour, but it is going distance or take a taxi. I'm sorry, Pat, we just couldn't stay.
now we are going to turn right here into Victoria Street. Do you remember the Albert pub here on the left-hand side? You can see the windows if you look carefully on the left. They're all etched glass. And I'm afraid the Christmas decorations get in the way a little bit, but you can see the actual glass itself. So it's beautifully restored in the old Victorian way. So it's a real old Victorian hostelry. We have many pubs in London, of course we do, but that one always looks quite striking anyway. In amongst all the modern buildings of Victoria Street, there it is, a little Victorian pub. But pubs are great, and if you ever want a bite to eat, then they're good at lunchtime, they're good in the evening. You get what we call pub grub, which pub grub means it's sort of very straightforward, fairly simple food. Pie and mash, fish and chips, burger and chips, lasagna, that sort of thing. Salads, they're very basic and very tasty usually, and not as expensive as going to a restaurant. So there you go. So pub grub. Now let's turn into Victoria Street, and we're going back down towards Victoria, having another quick look at the Westminster Cathedral building. Now remember, I pointed out this morning the main Roman Catholic Church. It's the seat of the Archbishop of Westminster, Cardinal Vincent Nichol, and Cardinal Nichol presides over Westminster Cathedral, built over 80 years on the site of an old prison. They knocked down a prison, used the foundations for the cathedral, and that was completed in 1903. I like the tower of Westminster Cathedral because it's a tall, slender tower, like a campanile style tower. So look in the next gap in the buildings, just coming up on the left, and you will see just there, behind the square, in the gap, Westminster Cathedral. So we'll have to wait until the traffic lets us get a little bit further along. Forward and look to your left. Oh, the bus out of the way. There you go. No, that's nice. And they got the Christmas tree out front as well. So all of the brickwork of the cathedral, handmade bricks, they wanted a very different style to Westminster Abbey. They wanted to make sure when they built it in the early 20th century that it was very much distinguished from the medieval style that we saw down there at Westminster Abbey, the Coronation Church earlier on. And that's what they achieved, I think, in that Byzantine style of architecture. It's rather nice. Now Victoria lies ahead. There's two theatres here at Victoria, actually, the Victoria Palace Theatre and the Apollo Theatre, two theatres. We've got dozens of theatres in London, but just here in this district, the Golden Ballerina, I don't know if you can see from where you're seated, but they are just about to reopen the Victoria Palace Theatre in this new redevelopment of Victoria. They closed it, refurbished it completely, and it's beautifully restored with the Golden Ballerina on the top of the dome, which is just up here ahead of us on the right-hand side, where you see the orange crane there, just up along the side of the building. So that's the Victoria Palace. Billy Elliot, the musical, was playing there for quite a number of years until the theatre closed for the redevelopment. Also here, and that's on our left-hand side in a moment, is the Apollo Victoria, and that's where Wicked has been playing for more years than I care to remember, actually. It's the musical Wicked. It still plays to packed houses every single night, but it's been going for a decade or 2 decades, I reckon, at least. So that's here at Victoria as well, 2 theatres. Be nice when they get it all finished. So we're going to squeeze in between the theatre. There's the Victoria Palace on your right. Just there to the left, behind the little clock, Little Ben, is the station. They were building Victoria Station because they thought, well, Victoria is the link with the continent of Europe, the route to Paris, so we'll build buildings around the station in the French Empire style, and that's like on the left-hand side. So in a way, sometimes you drive around this district around Victoria and you think you're in central Paris rather than London. Now we're turning into Belgravia. Within just a stone's throw of Victoria, things change dramatically. You've got a beautiful church on the right. There's St. Peter's Church. And in front of you, the gardens on both sides of the roads. And behind those gardens, beautiful period properties. The estate is called Belgravia. All the land belongs to one man. That's the Duke of Westminster. They've owned the land here for generations. And all the buildings that were built on this land are leased on long leases. So apartments, small houses, and these squares that you see, the gardens on either side, these are the private gardens for the residents who occupy the apartments around the square. Because at the back of these, there are no gardens. There are just small, narrow streets with little tiny cottages where the horses and carriages used to be kept. But the gardens are in the front. So these are called key squares because anyone who is a resident has the right to have a key to their section of the garden. So that's why they're all private. So very nice streets, as you can see. Very elegant sort of area. The district of Belgravia. All the buildings in this sort of light coloured stucco. And as we make our way a little further along, we're going to leave Westminster and head into Chelsea. The district of Chelsea lies just up ahead with Sloane Square. And here in Chelsea, typically lots of terracotta buildings as we come round into one of my favourite squares in the city, actually, this one, Sloane Square. It's not got any grass, it's all trees. I've got some mistletoe in the trees, all lit up, and nice little bars and restaurants all the way around. It's the beginning of the King's Road, Chelsea. As we come round to the other side of the square, you'll see it, passing a little theatre here on the left. This is the Royal Court Theatre, and this is the Writers' Theatre, because that theatre on the left, the Royal Court, it tends to be all new plays, freshly written by aspiring playwrights. Now, if you look straight ahead of you, you can see a department store called Peter Jones. That was built in the 1920s, would you believe? It looks very modern for a 20s building. And the street just down where Peter Jones lies is Kings Road, Chelsea. And that's the main shopping street here in Chelsea, which some of you may be old enough to remember the punk era of the 1970s. That was when the Kings Road, Chelsea became a very, very cutting-edge place to be. So if you had a purple Mohican, you would hang out in the Kings Road, Chelsea. Malcolm McLaren, the manager of the Sex Pistols band, had his boutique, Let It Rock, in the Kings Road, Chelsea. So it was really cutting edge in the 1970s. Nowadays, 30, 40 years later, it's much more mainstream. Lots of nice fashion stores down there, lots of good clothes shops, but not cutting edge anymore. Very much establishment. The new Saatchi Gallery is down there. So this is Chelsea. The streets take us down towards the river, and we are about to see the grounds of the Royal Hospital. So as we cross the next set of lights, just here on the right hand side, you'll see a big red sign, and it says Royal Hospital, Chelsea. This is a home for old soldiers. The grounds here on the right, very elegant buildings. You can't see the main facade of the building very well from here, but it's over through the trees to the right. And the Royal Hospital, the home of the Chelsea pensioners, it says. And these men, if they have the accommodation in the Royal Hospital Chelsea, they wear a uniform, which is a black flat hat and a red coat. And the flat hat has RH on it, Royal Hospital. And that's their formal uniform, really, as an old soldier living in the Royal Hospital here. The grounds on the right, that's the home of the Chelsea Flower Show. I don't know if anyone's a keen horticulturalist here, but the main horticultural event here in this country is the Chelsea Flower Show, and it takes place in May. The Queen always attends, and the grounds of the Royal Hospital here on the right, that's where all of the gardens are produced, and it really is spectacular, actually. It's not just it's not cut flowers, it's actually designer gardens, basically, and it's all in there on the right. So we can see the river ahead of us, and as we come down to the river, Richard's going to turn left, takes us along by the Thames. We'll have another look and see if it's high or low, and you can see 4 very pale coloured chimneys in the distance. There are 4 of them, 1 on each corner of the building, and this is the old Battersea Power Station, which we'll look across the river in a moment and see was originally, when it was built in the 1930s, as a coal-fired power station, the largest brick building in the world. It closed as a power station, generated electricity from coal. It closed as a power station in 1982, and for the last several decades they've been trying to sell it to someone who would redevelop it. Eventually they have succeeded, and the Battersea Power Station area is being completely redeveloped. It's currently Europe's largest redevelopment site. The new US Embassy has been built beside it, and I'll show you where that is in a minute, across the river. And they're even extending the tube line to it to make it more accessible. So we're turning left. There, the bridge there ahead of you, you can see Chelsea Bridge. That takes you across the Thames, over to Battersea on the far side. And we're going to turn here, along by the river. Looking across through the trees, you can see the river itself. The tracks coming out of Victoria Railway Station, that's the next bridge you're looking at there. See the train coming over the top of us now. There we are. Heading across the river, out of Victoria, heading south. And once under the railway bridge, look across to the power station, and you can see the redevelopment of this massive, massive brick building. As I say, when it was built in the 30s, it was the largest brick building in the world. And it's all going to be apartments, offices, shops, the usual thing, completely redeveloped inside. Some of you may be aware of an album cover by a band called Pink Floyd. Anyone heard of it?
Yes.
And Animals, well, that was where the big flying pig was tethered on the album cover. Do you remember, between the chimneys of that power station? That was a big thing to do in those days. Nowadays you could Photoshop it, couldn't you? You could easily do it, but back in the 70s when it was actually done. They actually had to physically tether a pink inflatable flying pig between those chimneys, which they did. Now the new US Embassy is this strange looking silvery building over on the right. Can you see on the riverside there's a brick building, and then just behind it a silver building, which we'll see again once we get past the Shell filling station here, the petrol station. You get another view looking across the river, and the new American Embassy is just about to be occupied. They said they'd be in before Christmas. And if you look across there, you can see a cube of glass. The side of it looks like a silvery sort of strange silvery, I'm not sure, triangles really, or diamonds. And that's it there now, looking straight across to that cube of glass on the right. That's the new US Embassy. And it cost them, unbelievably, £850 million to build. What a price. And the architect is an American guy called Kieran Timberlake. And I've checked, and he is no relation to Justin. No relation whatsoever. But anyway, Kieran Timberlake is the architect. And it will open, I'm told, before Christmas. So the new embassy buildings will be completed. And the old embassy buildings in Grosvenor Square, where the American Embassy has been for 80 years, that has been sold off. And all of the interior of the building are going to be apartments. So that's all been sold off plan already. So there we are. Now here we are at Vauxhall Bridge. We're going to go straight on here, but across on the other side of Vauxhall Bridge we will see an unusual building with green glass sides. And that building is called Vauxhall Cross. It's the headquarters of MI6. Now, I always speak softly when I talk about MI6 because they're secret. That's the secret service. That's the British security services, or the arm of the British security services that look after our security around the world. So, their most famous employee? James Bond, 007, absolutely. So secretive, we don't even know who 001 to 006 are. If you look across, you'll see it with the green glass sides over to the right. See across the bridge? That big building there with the green glass sides. And you'll see it again once this apartment block gets out of the way. Look across. Now, does anyone remember the movie Skyfall, with James Bond movie, the one before last? That was the building that featured. There it is again, look on the right, and there was a big explosion in the middle. Do you remember? It was a big blast. That's it. Well, as you can see, it's all been repaired. Not really. So that's the headquarters of MI6, James Bond's employer, at Vauxhall Cross. Here on the left, here's a gallery. This is a beautiful old building. It's called Tate Britain. You see up the stairs on the left, the main entrance. And if you would like to see British art all throughout history, going right the way back, then that is where it's on display. If you like Turner, if you like the pre-Raphaelites, if you like Blake, you want to go all the way back in history, British painting is exhibited in there. Tate Britain, as opposed to Tate Modern, which is a bit further down the river. Now the Thames has gone down, has it not, since we last saw it? Because the river is much, much lower now than it was when we crossed Lambeth Bridge earlier on this morning. There's Lambeth Bridge, look. That's the bridge we originally crossed when we left the hotel. So we're going back across it and back round to the hotel now. So, as I said, we'll be back between 11:30 and 11:45. Well, it'll be about 11:45 when we get back, won't it? So we're bang on schedule. Now, as we cross Lambeth Bridge, look left, of course, and you'll see down to the London Eye and Parliament. Parliament, you can just about see the Victoria Tower of Parliament through the trees as we turn, as we come onto the bridge. Look left through the gardens, and there you can see the tower just there through the trees with the Union flag. But look over your left shoulder as we come onto the bridge and you'll see it again. Nice view downstream. And look how low the river is. There's people actually walking along them. There's somebody walking along the foreshore there on the mud. You could actually see one of the clock faces of Big Ben from this angle, the southern clock face. All the other three clock faces are covered in scaffolding. That's the only one you can see. That one we're looking at down there now, showing 20 minutes to 12. And a lovely side-on view of the London Eye. Look carefully at the London Eye. Can you see why it's not a Ferris wheel? It's cantilevered. Do you see it's only held on one side? And the capsules are on the external frame, right on the edge. So there we are. So London Eye. Keep looking left. You've got the Archbishop of Canterbury's front gatehouse, the red brick building on the left, Lambeth Palace gatehouse, dating back to 1499. That actual building, the actual gatehouse itself. And here, the nearest museum to your hotel is a museum of gardening. It's in this church, St Mary's Lambeth Church on the left. But look, here's the entrance to the museum. It's a garden museum. And people often say, well, why would you want to turn a church into a garden museum? Well, the church was empty, it was redundant, and it was thought that was a scandalous thing on the Archbishop of Canterbury's doorstep, an empty church. So what should we do with it? Well, in the churchyard, in the graveyard at the back, there were two famous gardeners buried. John Tredescant and his son. He was the man who brought the pineapple back to this country for the very first time. And so it was decided the theme should be gardening because of the famous gardeners buried in the churchyard. And incidentally, Captain Bligh is buried in that churchyard too. You know, Mutiny on the Bounty? Yeah, that's where he ended up. Died here in Lambeth in his bed with his boots on. They put him in the grave there in the churchyard at St Mary Lambeth. So guys, here we are, back to Hercules Road. I can see your hotel just up there on the left-hand side. So we're almost back there. A very big thank you to Richard for driving us around this morning. Shall we put our hands together for Richard? Excellent job done, Richard. Thank you very much. And ladies and gents, I hope you've enjoyed it. Some of you we may see later because some of you are going to the Tower of London. Some of you we won't see later, so we'll say goodbye to you and thank you when you get out of the hotel just here. And thank you very much for coming on the sightseeing with us this morning. Hope you had a lovely time. Nice sunny morning, so hope you've got some nice photographs and some nice memories as you went around the city this morning. So let's pull up outside the hotel, and if Julianne's got any more announcements, I'll hand over to her.
Get around over here.